This is the Social Skills Mastery Podcast, episode 293. To really compete as a professional or business owner, you have to own the room. That's why each week I bring you hot topics, tips, and expert interviews so you can stand out in competitive places. Let's get started. You already know the cost of staying silent in meetings, ducking small talk, and letting someone less capable own the room. Another quarter goes by, same story, same excuses. Step into the spotlight is 5 days with me in an exclusive private container where there's no lurking or hiding. We strip the hesitation, kill the overthinking, and install the behaviors that read as presence, not false performance. You'll feel more free to speak up. You'll connect on command. You'll feel different in the room because you will be different. So if you've been telling yourself that you'll work on it later, know that later is where executive presence goes to wither on the vine. Spots are limited on purpose so we can do the real work. If you're serious, grab your seat today at socialconfidencepro.com/spotlight. It's well worth your time. Picture this. A manager sits down for a one-to-one with, let's say, 10 minutes on the calendar, maybe 15 if they're feeling ambitious. Their laptop is open, their coffee's getting cold, and across the desk is one of their strongest people, someone who's sharp and capable, who they, in fact, fought to hire, and whose work is a level above almost anyone else on the team. Then the manager asks, "So, how's it going?" And their question is greeted by silence, or maybe one word: fine. Just fine. And then the manager is the one filling the space and asking follow-up questions and narrating their own week just to keep the air circulating in the room. And they're performing conversational labor, if you will. That's the story I want to start with today because I received a question recently from a newly promoted manager who just stepped into her first leadership role, maybe 2 months ago. And she said her people just sit there. She has to initiate every single talking point. And the one-to-ones have started feeling cringy to her. And she's starting to wonder if she's doing something wrong, or if this is just how her team is, or if she's simply not cut out for managing people. Welcome to the Social Skills Mastery Podcast. I'm Susan Callender, Executive Presence and Social Confidence Coach at Social Confidence Pro, and I work with high-performing professionals, the kind of people who've built serious, well-compensated careers by being genuinely excellent at what they do, with the exception of people skills. And today we're covering something that shows up constantly in that world, and that's why the people who are best at the actual work are so often the ones who go silent the moment the conversation isn't about work. Sound familiar? We're going to talk about what's really happening in that silence, the real cost of it, and then I'm going to walk you through what truly works, because this is just a skill gap, and skill gaps can be filled, and they must be filled in so you don't unexpectedly disappear into the abyss of that gap. So what I hear from managers frequently is the assumption that some people are just built to be silent contributors, which is certainly an oxymoron, and there's nothing to be done about it. That's what they think. I hear, "That's just who she is," or "He's an introvert. This is how he operates," and "She's exceptional at the work. She's just not a people person." Like you have to choose one or the other. The thing is, staying silent in a one-to-one is a behavior, and behaviors come from somewhere, like a one-off occurrence that became a habit, or past experiences, or out of a nervous system that's learned, often over years, that initiating conversation carries risks and holding back just feels safer. Almost every single one of my clients can talk for 40 minutes straight about their work without a hint of hesitation. Give someone their subject matter and just watch them light up. The words come easily and the confidence is right there. So it's not that they're people who can't communicate. That's certainly not it. It's that they've built their professional identity around being right and being precise and being the person whose output speaks for itself. And nobody ever taught them that relational communication is a completely different skill. And one that needs its own practice separate from the one that got them promoted this far. That's the piece managers miss. They think this person is sharp, so this should be easy for them. But being excellent at the work and being socially fluent are not the same category of skill. One is technical and the other is relational. And when someone spent 15 years getting rewarded for the first one and 0 years getting coached on the second one, well, of course, the one-to-one feels like they just landed in a country where they don't speak the language. So let's go inside that silence, because this is where a lot of managers get the story wrong. When your direct report sits there without saying much, it's almost never because they don't care or because they have nothing to say. In my experience coaching people through exactly this pattern, what's really happening is a kind of internal freeze. In real time, they're thinking, is this worth bringing up? Will I sound like I'm complaining? What if I say the wrong thing and it reflects badly on me? What if my manager asks a follow-up question and I can't answer it well? And the sharper someone is, and the more they've built their identity around being right, the more sophisticated that internal filtering process tends to be. So they're not being lazy. They're working hard in that silence, just not in a way that anyone can hear. It's an overthinking loop, and it happens so fast the person doing it doesn't even register it as thinking. It just feels like they have nothing to say. Now, layer onto that the fact that a lot of high performers have spent their whole career getting explicit, structured feedback and clear deliverables and clear results. A straightforward pass or fail, you could say. And a one-to-one is the opposite of that, because when you think about it, it's unstructured, it's ambiguous, and there's no clear right answer to how's it going. Now, for someone who spent their whole career succeeding in environments with clear inputs and outputs, an open-ended check-in can genuinely feel like being handed a problem with no defined parameters. So when a manager reads that silence as disengagement, or worse, as a character flaw, they're missing what's really a very solvable communication gap. And that misread is potentially very expensive, which brings me to my next point. And that's that this problem usually gets worse with seniority, not better. You'd think the further someone climbs, the more evidence they'd have that they belong, and the easier it would be to speak up. But almost always it's the opposite. And here's why. Confidence isn't one global trait that you either have or you don't. It's compartmentalized, domain by domain. Someone can have enormous, well-earned confidence in their specific expertise and almost none in a relational, ambiguous setting like a one-to-one. And both of those can be true about the exact same person at the exact same time. As that person gets promoted, the stakes attached to that relational domain, they go up every single time. More visibility, more senior eyes in the room, more consequences if they say the wrong thing. And while their actual practice at that specific skill hasn't grown at all because nobody ever separated it out as its own thing to build. You see what I'm saying? So the gap between their technical confidence and their relational confidence doesn't close as they rise. Instead, it widens. And that's the real reason so many high performers describe feeling more exposed, not less, the further they get in their careers. And it's not imposter syndrome in the way people usually use that phrase. It's more like an accurate read of a real specific skill gap that simply never got addressed, sitting right next to a skill that's truly excellent. So this isn't a confidence issue that improving performance will eventually fix on its own. Performance and this specific skill are just two separate tracks, and only one of them has been getting deliberate attention. So if you're a manager or a people leader just listening to this, I want you to just consider this for a second, because I think this is the part that gets glossed over a little too much. The person who stays silent in every one-to-one are often one of the most capable people on the team. And here's what happens next, over and over across countless companies that I've worked with. That person doesn't get considered for the promotion because the promotion committee wants to see someone who can demonstrate influence and who can present to the stakeholders and someone who can lead a room. And this person has never been taught how to do that. So they don't. They get passed over in favor of someone who's perhaps less capable, but a lot more comfortable talking. And that's a retention problem waiting to happen, because your best people are watching less qualified peers get promoted all around them. And eventually they leave and they take their institutional knowledge with them, along with every relationship that they built with your clients and your best partners. It's also a management pipeline problem, because the manager in the story that I told you about at the top of this episode, the one dreading her one-to-ones, isn't going to stay dreading them forever. Either she figures out how to close that gap, or she starts avoiding those conversations altogether. And now you've got a manager who's disengaging from her own team because nobody ever gave her the tools to draw people out. This isn't an individual failing on the part of the team member, but it is a training gap. And companies spend enormous budgets, as you know, on technical upskilling and on certifications and on leadership programs for the people who are already comfortable in the room. But almost nobody's training the specific learnable skill of relational communication for people whose strength is expert-driven. It's treated like a personality trait instead of a competency. And that's exactly why it never gets addressed, and why it also keeps costing companies their best talent at every performance review cycle. So before I tell you what does work, let me just save you some time and tell you what doesn't, because I see well-meaning managers try these fixes constantly. The first thing that doesn't work is more questions. Hear me out. If your direct report is freezing because open-ended questions prompt a feeling of overwhelm, throwing 5 more open-ended questions at them just compounds the freeze. How's it going? Anything on your mind? How are you feeling about the project? None of that gives a person's nervous system anything to hold on to. So forced casualness also doesn't work. And I've seen companies mandate icebreaker questions and 2 truths and a lie and donut coffee chats. All of it well-intentioned for sure. For sure. And for a lot of socially reserved professionals, it makes things worse, because now there's a social performance pressure layered on top of an already uncomfortable situation. And the third thing that doesn't work, and this is the one that really costs companies, is just waiting it out, hoping the person opens up eventually, once they're more comfortable. I've talked to managers who've been waiting for more than a year. Comfort alone doesn't build skill. Communication is trainable the same way that any hard skill's trainable. We just put more time into those hard skills, but only if someone teaches it with structure and repetition, instead of just hoping that it happens on its own. Hope is not a strategy for anything. Okay, here's what I want to give you. It's just something real to work with, because I don't ever want to leave you with a problem and no path forward on it. The first shift that's foundational to everything I teach is that you can't coach communication as a behavior fix alone. You have to work with the identity first. If someone privately believes, I'm not a people person, every communication tactic you hand them is going to bounce off that belief. This is the core of what I call the social identity shift, and it applies just as much inside a team as it does one-on-one. Because before you teach someone how to talk in a one-to-one, you have to help them see themselves as someone capable of that kind of conversation. If you skip that step, then the tactics don't stick. The second shift is to your structure rather than focusing on spontaneity. And This is important because detail-driven minds do their best communicating when there's a framework to work inside. So instead of "how's it going," give people something with defined inputs, like a shared pre-one-to-one document with 3 prompts, a recurring format that they can prepare for in advance. This isn't about making the conversation robotic. It's about giving someone with a highly structured mind a structure they can succeed inside of. The same way you'd never ask a specialist to solve a problem with no documentation and no context. Now, the third shift is rehearsal, which is also the part that's left out of corporate trainings. You would never expect someone to give a high-stakes presentation with 0 practice, but companies routinely expect people to walk into ambiguous, high-stakes conversations with 0 preparation and just perform. Why? Mental rehearsal, low-stakes practice reps, building the pattern before the pressure is on, that's how you build a habit of initiating instead of freezing. And the fourth shift, the one I think matters most for the managers out there, is this. Stop interpreting silence before investigating with better questions. You need a toolkit that gives you just the right questions to ask in these situations. I've watched people who used to sit through entire one-to-ones without offering a single unprompted thought become the person leading the stakeholder update 6 months later because someone finally taught them the specific learnable skill. I think about one person I work with, someone deep in a technical role who used to leave every single one-to-one having said almost nothing beyond status updates. 4 to 6 weeks in, the dynamic of those meetings has shifted by using exactly the shifts I just walked you through. That same person who previously sat there like a rock started sending their manager a single written thought before each one-to-one, just one sentence. And they decided that sentence in advance. Let's say, like something as simple as a decision they wanted a second opinion on. That was the entire intervention at first. One sentence prepared ahead of time, and less than 2 months later, that same person was the one requesting time on the agenda for the team meetings instead of waiting to be called on. Nothing about who they were changed. What changed was that the specific muscle finally got trained instead of hoped for. There's a fifth shift that I want to give you too because it's small, but it compounds really fast. Close the loop after the meeting, not just during it. If someone manages to say something in a one-to-one, even something small, follow up on that one specific thing within a day or two. Not a generic, great chat, but a direct reference back to that actual thing they said. That single follow-up does more to build the habit of speaking up than almost anything said in the room itself because it proves with real evidence that what they said mattered enough to be remembered. That's the fastest way I know to convince someone's nervous system that participating is safe, not just something you told them, but something they watched happen. I want to speak directly for a moment to the HR and people leaders and the managers and the directors listening to this because I know a lot of you found this episode because you're living exactly this story right now. You're watching your sharpest, most capable people get passed over again and again, not because they lack ability in any way, but because nobody ever taught them how to translate that ability into presence. And you've probably tried the generic communication workshop, the one that feels completely disconnected from how your strongest, most detail-driven people think and operate. That disconnect is exactly the gap I built my work to close. My approach doesn't ask your team to become extroverts, and it doesn't hand them generic tips about eye contact and small talk. It works with how highly capable minds operate, building identity, structure, and rehearsal into a process that gets your best people speaking up, leading rooms, and initiating the conversations that used to make them freeze. So if you're a manager who's tired of doing all the conversational labor in your one-to-ones, or if you're a people or an L&D leader who's watched your most capable people get consistently overlooked at every promotion cycle, that gap is not going to close on its own. It closes with training built for the minds you're trying to develop. And that's the work I do with organizations. One team, one department, one leadership pipeline at a time. If that's you, I genuinely love to talk. Reach out to socialconfidencepro.com and let's figure out what closing that gap could look like for your team. Here's what I want you to do this week, just depending on which seat you're in. If you're the manager, pick one person whom you know tends to go silent in your one-to-ones, and before your next one, send them 3 specific written prompts in advance. Not how's it going, but something concrete, like what's one thing that felt harder than it should have this week? Or what's one decision you made that you'd like my take on? Give their nervous system a structure to prepare inside of instead of a blank page to freeze in front of. And if you're the one who goes silent, pick one upcoming meeting, and before it starts, write down one specific thing you're going to say in the first 5 minutes, no matter what. Not your best idea, just one sentence, decided in advance, so you're not relying on finding the courage live in the moment with everyone watching. Okay, here's your homework either way. Try it once this week and notice what shifted. Not whether the conversation was perfect, but whether it felt even slightly less like a blank page. That's the evidence a new pattern is starting to form. If you're managing someone who just sits there, that silence very likely is not the whole story. They're overthinking and not conscious of how that deep thought is being perceived. And if you're that person who's having difficulty expressing yourself, I want you to know that's not who you are. That's a skill you haven't been taught yet because you didn't know there were resources available for you to break out of it. If this episode brought something to the surface that you've been experiencing, whether you're the manager or the one going silent in the room, share it with someone who needs to hear it and book a call with me at socialconfidencepro.com/coach. Thanks so much for spending this time with me today. Bye for now. Wait, if you've been nodding along thinking, yep, that's me, you already know the cost of staying silent when it matters, letting the update speak for you instead of speaking up for yourself and watching someone less capable get the nod because they were simply willing to be seen. Another review cycle goes by, same story, same reasons why now still isn't the right time. Smart, skilled, and still overlooked is my free training, and it's built for exactly this moment. In it, I'll walk you through the 3-step playbook to get promoted without changing your personality and without playing a political game you don't believe in. You'll leave knowing exactly what's been keeping you invisible to the people making the decision and exactly what to do about it starting this week. If you're telling yourself you'll work on it once things calm down, that's the habit talking. Later is how a promotion slips to someone else instead, again and again. This is live, it's free, and seats are limited on purpose because the value is in the specifics, not in a recording you half watch while doing 3 things afterward. If you're serious, grab your seats now. The link is in the show notes.